Question. This actually is a serious question. Why don't you like us black people? Non-American Asians always gave me the cold shoulder. American Asians were cool and I often hang out with them. Are they just not used to us? Um,
Partially.
Sad to say, but I know that there's anti-blackness very much so in a lot of Asian American communities. And obviously, unfortunately, anti-blackness is global. And I think like in
It's a very long historical answer.
yeah.
Some of it has to do with not being used to it. Okay, so colonization happened throughout the whole world when white colonizers took over Asia, Africa, all the other continents. And with that came the belief of anti blackness that was instilled upon all of these communities. Now, once those colonizations ended, you were left with this homogenized community where they don't know anyone who don't look like they're all white, all Asian, all South Asian, whatever it may be. And then all of a sudden, you fast forward to having technology and Western media, because again, controlled by whiteness, is pushing out this message of that black communities are gangsters, do this, they do that. And then that media gets pushed out into the world in the form of movies and TV shows. And now you take this homogenized community who has learned anti blackness through colonization and stuff like that, on top of the fact that it's then mixed with people who are learning about these races for the first time through fictionized television that is controlled by white media. And then you have this biased look. So when they meet black people for the first time, they're having to reconcile what they have been essentially brainwashed into thinking versus then trying to figure out what that means when they meet you and they're like, but you're not any of these things, which is the reason why you get a lot of people from Asia who are having to go through that discovery, and Asian Americans who grew up with that and know that those are things that are essentially propaganda, mind washing, to keep upholding this idea of, and instead of using the WS word, I'm going to say anti-blackness because one is,
Hand in hand.
hand in hand, and they push this anti-blackness, then it's basically global propaganda. So then people are trying to, you know, come to those terms. And instead of just being hateful, they may just not understand.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think that's like the short end of it.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing to contribute. That was very concise. A lot of people are just conditioned to believe that black people are whatever the conditioner wants you to believe they are.
Yep.
And like my grandma, she the only black people she had ever seen were um, American soldiers in Korea, and to her, they were all part of the same group. And then when she came to America, all she knew about black people was, like you said, what she had seen on TV, what people had told her. And so she was very distrusting of black people. And I was like, how many black people are just like everybody else? Like, I go to school with black kids, like, and she was just like, oh no, they're very dangerous. I'm like, they're not. They're not. This is just what people wanted you to believe. But what else did she know? You know what I mean? She's just this like, country girl from, uneducated, and is told by everybody in power what to believe. My God is better. My people are better. My guns are better. So she's like, okay, well, all of these things are better. So I better side with the better side.
See, there's one good thing about the truth is, however much you try to bury it in the lies and propaganda, it will always outlive the propaganda and the lies. And that's what we are seeing today when, immigrants who have always looked down upon black people starts to challenge their own narratives or the propaganda narratives they have held for so long coming to America. And what we are seeing today in the American society, for example, when it comes to immigrants and especially Asian immigrants with their anti-black attitudes, is actually a much more layered ideology that they come with than we've bothered to really try and dissect. And not everybody that arrives to America with the same mindset. And I've been trying to really observe this, and they're kind of like three categories or more. But especially much more pronounced 3 categories that I want us to expose in this video. Now, before we go into that, let's watch these videos I have for you, and we'll be back with a good analysis.
As for what I was told in the home behind closed doors when I was growing up, that's not the most fun trip down memory lane, but I always like to be honest about acknowledging anti-Blackness among Asian Americans, especially when the call was coming from my own house, so here we go. I first became aware of my mom's anti-Blackness when I started kindergarten, and it mostly centered around avoiding interactions with Black people and not allowing me to be exposed to anything that she considered Black culture. So if we were walking and she saw a Black person, she would pull me closer to her. If we were in the car in a parking lot and saw a Black person in the parking lot, she would make a point to lock the doors, and I wasn't allowed to listen to rap or Michael Jackson or Tina Turner. And she was hypocritical about that, because I wasn't allowed to listen to Cyndi Lauper or Madonna either. She would call it trash music and say that it was going to be a bad influence. But if it was a white artist, it was not racialized. It was only when it was Black artists that it was racialized. And another thing that I think is kind of typical is, as a musician, there were a lot of Black artists whom she respected and enjoyed, but she would always say that one Black artist is the exception, the rest are bad influences. When I went to school, if I came home and said I made a friend, her first question would be white or Black. And that drove me nuts, because in preschool, I dealt with a lot of bullying and discrimination because of being Asian, so it didn't make sense to me that she wanted me to turn around and do that very same thing to my Black classmates, whom she knew nothing about, on the basis of their skin color. And when I wouldn't stay away from my Black friends, she would resort to making up justifications as to why it was harmful for me. She would say they're going to hurt me and they're going to be a bad influence because they fight and they swear and they're not good students. And of course, none of that was true. And in my household, it was not physically or emotionally safe to voice your opinions, but about that I would, because it literally angered me. And then she would resort to physical violence. And that sealed the deal in my mind that prejudice is purely irrational, because none of her claims had any basis in reality, and that's why she had to resort to physical force. Unfortunately, I think that when parents resort to intimidation and violence to instill prejudice in their children, a lot of times it works. But I was very lucky, because the principal of my elementary school was a Black woman who implemented a program called Students Educating Each Other About Discrimination. And that wasn't centered on racial discrimination, it was about discrimination in general. But in that program, we learned to have discussions about discrimination and to identify it and disrupt it. Which at that age just means if you witness discrimination, say it's discrimination and articulate how you know that it's discrimination. So from learning that very powerful tool at school, I was able to identify that what my mom was doing at home was wrong. Additionally, the principal was a Black woman, so I had a Black woman in a position of leadership as a role model. And in my school district, she wasn't a token. They really valued Black leadership, from teachers to administration, guidance counselors, all the way up to superintendents. And so I was surrounded by Black role models who made me see that reality did not line up with what my mom was trying to teach me. The straw that broke the camel's back was sometime around the ages of between 7 and 9. I was planning a birthday party, and I told my mom that I want to invite my friend Keisha, which I knew was going to be an issue, but I thought I would try. And she said no, and I said, fine, then I don't want to have a birthday party, and she made me have the birthday party. So now that felt like that's not only cruel to me, but that's cruel to my friend Keisha, whom you don't even know because you refused to meet her. Shortly after that, we were walking in the mall, and my mom did this thing that she often did, which is she sees Black people minding their own business, and under her breath, she mumbles a derogatory term in Chinese for Black people. And I remember I pulled back on her hand and faced her, and I said, they are not doing anything. You don't know them. The next time you do that, I am going to go up to them, and I'm going to tell them what you said. And believe it or not, the fear of exposure by me actually made her tone it down, and she stopped doing that in public. Fortunately, my mom did not live and die that way. In later years, she came around to seeing and later openly admitting how wrong she was. In her older age, one of her best friends really was Black, and my mom admitted to her friend what her previous attitudes had been and why. And from those conversations, I was able to gain some insight as to what my mom's motivation was for her anti-Blackness. Because I think most people feel, since Asian Americans also are harmed by white supremacy, how does it make any sense for Asian Americans to be anti-Black? My mom spent most of her young life in Hong Kong when it was under British occupation, and then in the 1950s, she came to the United States when she was 16 years old. Generations before my mom, her family had been living in and doing business around Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Macau, which were French, British, and Portuguese occupied areas. So she was heavily indoctrinated into anti-Blackness in Hong Kong, where she had no exposure to Black people that would have shown her a different reality. And furthermore, what she was indoctrinated into is the idea that an Asian can elevate their status in white spaces by aligning with white supremacy, which includes aligning with anti-Blackness. So I think what my mom was doing with me is that from a young age, she saw that I was having a hard time as an Asian American assimilating. So she felt that if I associated with Black classmates, that would make assimilating into white spaces even harder. And she was concerned that associating with Black classmates would negatively impact my status in white spaces. Well, we all know with me that the outcome was I understand very clearly what spaces I want to be part of and what spaces I don't. So my mom was really proud that she was westernized. She was proud that she spoke English without an accent, that she was very well versed in European culture, and she actually looked down upon my dad for being what she called traditional and therefore backwards. Right, so where was my dad in all of this? My dad grew up in Taiwan, where he had no exposure to Black people, but he also had very little exposure to Western media. I think when he came to the United States, he was a bit uncertain around Black people because of the lack of familiarity and the slight media bias, but it only took a very little being around Black people to see that prejudice is irrational and that it serves a white supremacist agenda that he doesn't want to uphold. As I said before, in my household, it wasn't physically or emotionally safe to voice opinions that differed from my mom, so I do understand why my dad didn't speak up when my mom was being anti-Black. He had a hard enough time keeping my brother and I safe. However, what he would do is when it was just my dad and I, he would make sure to teach me or give me resources about accurate Black history. So for example, a lot of my mom's rhetoric surrounded musicians. So my dad would teach me about Berry Gordy, Chuck Berry, Marian Anderson, Jesse Norman. If the claim was that Black people don't value education, he would tell me about Black scholars, academics, and scientists, and so on. So that, in a nutshell, is what I was told at home behind closed doors when I was...
Actually, a lot of Black people you'll talk to say they prefer the racism in China over back in the States. They perceive it to be differently because here they see it more as ignorance, whereas in the States it's more like hate. Like people actually hate you and like want to kill you or threaten you violently. But in China, it's more like, it's just different. It doesn't seem like they hate you. Especially when I speak Chinese, I can go almost anywhere and talk to people, at least in the places I've been so far. And people will kind of accept me, I guess. I don't know how else to explain that, but they won't be like, oh, get out of my store. They won't follow me around in the store and see if I'm trying to steal something. They won't, like, I don't know, be rude to me. Now, that's not the case for all Black people. Again, I'm the Obama Black, I guess, that Chinese people are more comfortable with. So when you have kind of darker skinned Black people, their experiences are much...
Americans, why y'all don't like us for real?
All right, important question, so I'm going to try to answer it. But not in the way you might think. Because what I'm not going to do is try to answer or justify away anti-Blackness that does exist in the Asian American community. And with what I'm about to say next, I'm not trying to be like, well, but, what about you guys? I do want to gently push back against the comment that the Black community rocks with the Asian American community. Because if we're keeping it a buck, the animosity doesn't just go in one direction, it goes both ways. And that's what I want to address. And the way I'm going to do that is by giving context on my community. The Asian American community is made up of people from dozens of different countries that speak dozens of different languages, have different religious beliefs, and believe it or not, the hatred that exists within our community against one another is much stronger. And why is that? Well, maybe because we've been at war with each other for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Now, here's some more context. The majority of our community is first or 1.5 generation immigrants. Why is that important? That means that English is not their first language, American culture is not what they understand, nor do they have a strong grasp or understanding of American history. Now, for many of us who were born here and grew up here, we know about systemic racism. We have seen and experienced firsthand how harmful racism is. And we're taught about the civil rights movement. Granted, it was a whitewashed version, and I didn't actually learn about Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, Yuri Kochiyama, Grace Lee Boggs until I actively sought out that information myself. But that being said, I want to talk about Yuri Kochiyama. A lot of people don't know how close Malcolm X and Yuri Kochiyama were. In fact, in Spike Lee's adaptation of Malcolm X's life, he actually excludes the fact that Malcolm died in Yuri Kochiyama's arms. What's also not taught is the murder of Vincent Chin, and how his story doesn't become a national story if Reverend Jesse Jackson doesn't fly up to Detroit and demand that it becomes a national story. But people also don't know about leaders like Kathy Masayoka, who has been going to Congress year after year to testify using the reparations given to Japanese Americans after internment as justification for why the Black community and Black people deserve reparations too. So how do we fix this? I strongly believe that a lot of this is miscommunication, at least misunderstanding, and that has caused a lot of the pain that exists within our communities. So having dialogue like this, building real relationships in real life, coming together and partnering and actively working to understand one another better, sharing resources and opportunities, showing up for one another, and welcoming one another into our homes. Look, I'm not here to deny that individual Asian Americans have caused a lot of harm towards the Black community, nor am I going to blame the entire Black community for the harm that individuals that are in the Black community have caused towards the Asian American community. But what I am calling for is for us to actively seek to understand each other and work together. Because together we are so powerful, and there's so much love that already exists. I hope this helps.
Let me get this clear. This woman right here, this individual does not represent the Asian community. Her POC card is revoked. She is not a person of color anymore. White people, you can have her. The reason why I'm saying this is because I'm sick and tired of seeing my Asian people in the comments talking about, I apologize on her behalf. I apologize for her behavior. Oh my God, I am so ashamed of being Asian. Shut the fuck up. You shouldn't apologize for someone else, bro. Real shit. Like, she is not even part of our community, so don't even. Why would we let this woman represent our community when she's making us look bad? No, she is not Asian, period. Another thing I want to say is that two wrongs do not make a right. Just because you've seen this one Asian, I put the quotation marks around the Asian because she's not Asian in my book. Just because you've seen this one Asian lady be racist does not mean you should be racist to all Asian people. This one Asian lady should not represent the Asian community as a whole. That's ridiculous. Do not respond in racism towards Asian people as a whole, bro. You're coming for me who's not racist. You're coming for everybody who's not racist. Every Asian that's not racist. It doesn't make any sense. Like, if you see the comments of this video, you see everybody moving like New York drill rappers if they were racist. They're talking about every Asian shot, every Asian dead, smoking on all Asians. I'm on BT with every Asian. Stop Asian hate, more like go Asian hate. Fuck all the Asians. Like, relax, please. She is not Asian. She does not represent our community. Please. Another point I want to make is that Asian people and Black people should not go against each other. We are both minorities in America. If anything, we should reunite and fight against the system, the unfair system. Tension between the Asian community and the Black community has been here for a very long time. You can clearly see this in the 1992 LA riots. But this is what the media wanted. This is what the government wanted. They want minorities to go against each other. So we should change that and join forces. Like, what are we doing? Imagine how powerful we will be. Like, look at Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. We should be like these. We should be like them. Like, look at Blasian people, bro. A lot of them love saying I'm Blasian every 5 seconds. They love saying I'm Blasian every sentence that they make. But you know why they do that? It's because they're very proud of being both Black and Asian. They united. That's a terrible fucking point. That's a bad example. But I think you get what I mean. So the moral of the story is that we should stop racism. Stop. And as minorities in America, we should all unite.
The Asian community is literally so anti-Black, and it literally fucking pisses me off. Like, we are literally so uneducated, uninformed, just misinformed, everything about the Black community, and it pisses me off. And like, it just boggles my mind how a lot of Asians see Black people as beneath them. I shit you not, I literally saw someone on my story and I literally was so gagged. Like, I was like, are you serious right now? And I sent him a message, ask him if he's being serious about this. This guy is Bhutanese. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but like, I guess he got like some kind of spray tan or whatever because he's doing some kind of stupid movie shoot or whatever. Roy posts on his story and says, because his skin is like 10 shades darker or something, he said, can I say the N-word now? With a ninja emoji next to it. I slid up so fucking quick and I asked this man, are you fucking serious right now? And guess what? That man left me on red. Need I say again that he is not black? He is Bhutanese from Bhutan or whatever the fuck you pronounce it. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Quite honestly, like, the Asian community is literally so underhandedly racist to the black community, and it just, like, not to mention the black community is one of the most supportive of marginalized groups that has ever, like, uplifted the Asian community and actually put effort into supporting us. I'm probably gonna piss a lot of Asians off for saying that, but it's literally the truth, and I fucking see it.
I woke up out of my sleep because this needed to be said. Asians want to be black adjacent with white privilege. And just that thought alone, which is a very true thought, is kind of sickening because, again, I'll never stop speaking on it. They emulate black culture, black aesthetics, everything so heavily in the means of joking or because it's wacky. You know, white people try to say that all the time back in the day. Oh, black people do this wacky, funky stuff. And then hoopla, hoopla, they try to switch it to something else. They try to give it a different name. But it's sad because, again, Asian people know what it's like to experience racism, especially from white people, and to be oppressed by white people. However, they get that bit of what they feel is an amenity and they turn it towards black people. They want to be black adjacent with white privilege. And that's just the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Guys, Africa is fighting again because I said that Nigeria is my favorite country in Africa. And under that video in the comment section, each comment has like hundreds of responses of Africans going at it with each other. And let me tell you something about Africans. They do not mince their words. I know a lot of you think that I'm just a dumb influencer, which I am, but I learn. And I learned from the last time that I tried to defend Nigeria from all of Africa for releasing their beautiful Korean-inspired movie, My Sunshine, which is available on YouTube for free to stream for yourself. And when I tried to intervene, all of Africa, including the Nigerians, came after me. They were like, Chris, you stay out of it. This is a family matter. And I was like, oh, okay. But I do have to say, like, as someone who is not all that sensitive, the words that you share do cut a little deep for me. You know, the words you share are quite sharp. If Americans talk to each other like that, they would cry themselves to sleep and take a mental health break. I do think all the other continents can learn something from Africa. Despite all their squabbles among themselves, they still come together to defend each other. And I wish we could see more of that in other continents. Look at Europe. The more I learn about Europe, the more shocked I am that you guys even managed to form the European Union in the first place. Because I don't even know if you guys like each other. And actually, given that one of you left, maybe you don't. And I have long given up on my dreams of seeing the 3 East Asian countries, Japan, China, and Korea, get along with each other because that will never happen. That will never happen in our lifetime. Go after China and Japan and Korea will be the first to step in. You go after Korea, then China and Japan will be the first to step in. And you go after Japan and China and Korea will be the first to step in. And that one, we can understand, right? You understand, right? Japan? わかってるよね? What I have come to realize is that this triangle of hate that exists between these 3 countries is actually what brings unity to these 3 countries. Because while we hate each other, we also love each other for hating each other. So in order to maintain peace among these 3 countries, we must continue this ongoing hate. Korea, kimchi, is Chinese. China, it's Lunar New Year, not Chinese New Year. Japan?
As a Korean girl, like dating a black guy, what would you say you've learned so far from the foreign culture or the black community culture?
There's definitely a difference in race for sure because he always says that it's a black thing, but I don't know. And he said, I'm black, like black people don't swim, we're not in the water a lot. He doesn't like the water, but I am an island girl, like I love swimming. And then he also like always says when I want to go out in the summer, he's he's like, oh, I'm black, like black people don't like being in the sun, or when it's cold, like he's like, oh, like I'm black, like we don't like being out when it's cold. His music taste is also different because like even though he's black, I like to listen to like very old R&B songs, and he thinks they're depressing and sad because he listens to like rap and trap music. Other than that, I think maybe hair. I used his hair product and I found out that I was actually naturally wavy hair because because he's black, he has curl cream, like curly hair.
2 eggs for me. Hi, sweetie. Hi, Kayla.
I hate this so much. Yes, Chinese people can be racist too. They are human beings. God, we can suck.
It's just a reminder that even if you align yourself with whiteness as a person of color, that does not mean you will be fully accepted. I feel really terrible having to make this video, but I recently found out that a friend of my family is facing deportation. Through no fault of her own, obviously, but the government picks and chooses who to deport, and most of the time, it's innocent families being broken apart. In this case, this woman has been in the United States for decades. She's a Vietnamese immigrant. She is a Republican who married a white Republican man out in Fresno. Problem is, one day they showed up, arrested her, and now she has an ankle monitor and is facing deportation to where? We don't know. They're actively looking for a place to deport her to because she has absolutely no connections or roots to her home country anymore. She is shocked. She's like, I can't believe this. I voted for Trump multiple times. I can't believe they would do this to me. It's because the administration and white people, white conservative people, do not care about you as a person of color. Even if you think you are aligned with whiteness, they will always betray you when it benefits them. And even if your close circle sees you as one of them, the institution itself does not. To them, you will always be an immigrant, which is completely sad and terrible. I feel horribly for this person, but keep in mind this is not a unique story.
All right. Now, I said at the beginning that there are about like 3 different categories of immigrants. Now, the first category is almost an innocent one. Yeah. And these people who they're the kind of people who may have grown up in very isolated environments where they rarely ever interact or come across black people, you know. So sometimes what looks offensive is less about hatred and more about unfamiliarity and curiosity, you know, a curiosity driven unfamiliarity. You know, years ago, that explanation, these might have made more sense. But in today's world, though, full of the media, social media, and, you know, music, sports, and global culture, it's becoming harder and harder for someone to claim, you know, to be ignorant or so unfamiliar about black people. Maybe some time ago that was possible, to have been born in the farthest part of Russia or Eastern Europe and claim to have never come across a black person in your life. But how about today with social media, with mainstream media, and black people are everywhere today, you know? Still, this kind of group is usually, you know, not really driven deeply by hatred, but maybe by lack of exposure. But we can claim this is a category that hardly exists today. Now, there is a second category, though, this comes from, and I think this is where most immigrants lie. It comes from the legacy of colonialism of the entire world and media propaganda. So colonization did not just conquer territories and countries. It also created narratives about black people and exported that across the world. For many people and for many generations, people were taught that blackness was connected to violence, you know, primitiveness, you know, poverty, dysfunction. And even today, you know, global media still and often reinforces these same stereotypes about black people being violent. Say black Americans, they are violent, they are lazy. Say black people in the continent of Africa being primitive and backward, you know. And so many immigrants, then they arrive in, say, in America, for example, already carrying these distorted perceptions before they even have real interactions with black communities. But then here is where the interesting part now comes in, you know. Often when reality clashes with this propaganda they come with, you know. Once people actually begin living around Black people in America, in the Caribbeans, in South America, for example, in Africa, you know, working with them and building friendships, if at all you're ready to put aside your projections and the beliefs you carried out of a false narrative and start working with them and seeing everyday life with these people, many begin to realize that what they were taught actually is not the reality about Black people. And that creates a real conflict in their minds between the narrative they inherited and what they experience in real life now interacting with Black people. You realize these people, they're not as primitive, they're not violent, they're not backward, you know, they're just normal people. And now this contradiction between what they thought, their perception or the narrative they had, and reality, often there are those who will embrace and try to change what they thought was the truth, but there are those that cannot wrap that around their heads and they fight the truth. They begin to like kind of fight the truth, and you know, because they don't want to change and accept the truth. Now, this now then leads us to the third category, you know, and this is the most dangerous one. These are the people who fully buy into the idea that now being closer to whiteness somehow makes them superior, gives them some superiority. That is what many people have been calling, you know, proximity to white supremacy or to whiteness, you know, and they think that now distancing themselves from Black people gives them some status of acceptance by whiteness. However, history has shown us repeatedly that this proximity to whiteness is never permanent acceptance. Whiteness will never accept you just because you're slightly lighter than Black people, you know, or lighter than your category of people. In the case of these Asian people, the Indians, you know, and their caste system. White supremacy has always used the divide and conquer tactics, convincing different groups that they are better than Black people, so they can never now unite against the real systems of power. But, you know, many people have never really bothered to think of, you know, the truth in these lines. And now many people are beginning to wake up, though. And that's what we are seeing in these many videos, you know. Younger generations of immigrants or children of immigrants, you know, are starting to question the narratives they inherited from either their parents or their grandparents, you know. They are realizing that the stereotypes are very exaggerated or completely false, you know, in the first place. And many are also discovering something ironic, you know, that the same Black communities they were taught to look down on are often the loudest voices that are fighting for justice, equality, and dignity for everyone. In the case of America, for instance, if it were not for the struggle, the sacrifices of Black Americans during the civil rights movement, I don't think, you know, any immigrant would have had the chances and the freedoms they enjoy today, you know. So really, that awakening is beginning to crack apart, you know, the decades of propaganda and lies, and the truth is beginning to finally, you know, become exposed and accepted. And that's why this kind of conversation or these kinds of conversations are becoming impossible to actually ignore. And the people that are now leading this are the same people from the other side, not even Black people. Yeah. So really, that's it for this video. That's what I had for you in this video. I hope you enjoyed, you learned something. If you did, and if you have something you want to share, then leave me your opinions and your thoughts in the comment sections. And if you love this video, give it a thumbs up. You can share it as well. But most importantly, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.